Call the special meeting to order. I want to thank DLZ for coming tonight. We appreciate it. And we have basically another presentation from DLZ in reference to our feasibility study and what they'd like to do for us as far as our correctional facilities and to help us out with some of the shortfalls that we have and whatnot. So I think with that, I'll
Lori's going to start.
turn it over to you folks.
Thank you.
Well, thank you and good evening. We appreciate the time. My name is Lori Christie. I've met several of you. I've been with DLZ for quite a number of years. And with me this evening is Eric Ratz and Scott Carnegie, and they are both architects. Senior architects, have worked in the Correctional Architecture Division with DLZ for quite a number of years. And we're no stranger to Fayette County. We've been down here a number of times and have toured some of the facilities. And we appreciate the time this evening to talk to you a little bit about some of your needs and how they may have evolved from the last time that we've talked. So I know they've handed the presentation out and it's on the screen as well, and I'm going to turn it over to Eric Ratz.
All right. Thank you very much. So we're going to go through this, and this is going to be as informal but also as formal type of a thing as we can, so that we get as much communication back and forth to be
Can I have
helpful.
one? I'm so sorry.
Absolutely. There you go. We have plenty of extras, so here we go, guys.
I don't think so.
She got one. Oh.
Okay, so anybody else need one? We good? Okay, so just a little bit about DLZ. You probably know some things about DLZ, but I would like to just go through and talk to you a little bit about this. We are a full-service architectural and engineering firm, and what that means is any of the services for our projects that we do, we typically do it all with DLZ employees. And that's something that we've just built our business on. As you can see, we're one of the largest and oldest companies in the United States. We've been in business for 103 years. Okay, and it's something we're very proud of. For any kind of a business to be doing work that long, you've obviously done a lot of good work for a long time. So just to skip over a couple of these things, but if you look at the map on the right-hand side, that's where we have done what we call justice architecture in the state of Indiana. And what that means is whether we've done jails, community corrections, work release, juvenile, courthouse type projects. It's whether we've done studies or we've done designs. And that's 61 of the 92 counties in Indiana, and all but 2 of those have been since the year 2000. Okay? One of the things that also we like to point out is that Engineering News Record ranks DLZ the #1 correctional design firm in the Midwest, and also we're #6 in the country, but most importantly to us is we're #1 in the Midwest because that's the only place that we practice. Scott and I live in Indianapolis. Or excuse me, we work out of our Indianapolis office. He's actually a Bloomington guy. I'm a Martinsville guy. I will tell you my little connection with Connersville. In 1985, I was playing in the Spartan Bowl. We used to be in the same conference, playing basketball, got an elbow and chipped my front tooth in the second quarter of the game. So never forget that moment. But anyway, so we're here. We obviously do a lot of work in Indiana. And we know obviously all the standards and all the approaches and all the things that goes to putting into an overall jail facility. And what we'd like to do is talk to you more about that tonight.
What's ENR?
Pardon me?
What's ENR?
Engineering News Record. It's a national publication that does listings of all types of different things for all types of different services, different building types, both from a contractor's point of view as well as design build, architects, engineers, transportation stuff. It's all across the board with that. Good question. So a little bit about our key team members, because I think it is important. I am Eric Ratz, as Lori pointed out. I am the principal architect in charge of the correctional group with DLZ. Been at DLZ almost 20 years. January will be 20 years. And 32 years ago, I started in this profession. First thing I ever worked on was the Reception Diagnostic Center down in Plainfield for the Indiana Department of Corrections. Kind of got that feel for it. And one of the things, I know Scott's heard this 1,000 times, but one of the things that was really intriguing to me is that my father and I, we used to debate correctional designs. And we would say he was very much the believer of 6-sided concrete box, put them in there, throw the key away and everything will get better. It doesn't work, and we'll talk to you why that's a little bit, why that some of those things need to change. Scott, I'll let him talk about himself here in a minute, but what we've done here is we identify our key leaders of each one of the disciplines as we go forward. And you're going to see that we've worked together a long time, and we worked together a long time doing these types of projects. And that's why we believe that we are the most experienced correctional design team in Indiana, if not Indiana, maybe in the Midwest. Because this is what we do, it's what we live every day. So Scott, a little bit about yourself.
Scott Carnegie, project manager with DLZ. Been in this profession for 25 years. I'm surprised Eric didn't mention this, but in 1994, which coincidentally the year I graduated from college, that was the year that Eric and I started working together, and we've worked with each other ever since. My connection is Frazee Elementary School. Did a window replacement probably in 1995-ish, 1996. That's my connection here. Is one of the first projects right after I graduated from college.
I thought you were going to talk something about being a diver and swimming.
No, what's my there.
All right. So one project that you probably know a lot about, it's just down 44 from here, is the Rush County Sheriff's Office and Jail. We're the architect for the project. It's my job in working with it. And we can go back to about the year 2008, 2009, when we did an initial feasibility study on what they needed to do. And then we went to about 2012, 2013, we did another one. And then in 2016, they hired us to come in and do a project. And with the project, we looked at a whole lot of sites, and we ultimately decided to build the jail in the downtown, right behind to the south side of the existing jail. We're going to be completed with the jail by the end of this year. And then they're going to go and demolish the old jail, make that the parking lot, and then the whole jail will be completed sometime around March, April, once the asphalt plants start up. A couple things about the jail. It's 119 beds. They're right around 65 or so now. 119 beds is what we decided on. It also has community corrections. We have one of the housing units we're going to be using for work release. It's got the 911 dispatch, it's got the coroner, the sheriff's office, it's got a whole lot of training room, a whole lot of stuff in the overall facility. And I know that there's been some information that has been shared, there's probably some information that's been in newspapers, but I'd like to clarify one thing that was clarified in a commissioner meeting about a month ago, is that we're about 77% done with the project. And through the project so far, we've had 0.32% in change orders. I'm going to ask these guys, I'm going to put them on the spot. If you had a project of 1/3 of 1%, what would you say to your client? Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So not to put you on the spot, but 1/3 of 1% of all change orders. Everything. Owner requested. Out of the $50,000, we have about $18,000 in bad soils when they put up the new communication tower. Okay, so if you take that away, it gets to a much lower number. Some of the misunderstandings about it is that we had budgeted $388,000 for change orders for unforeseen conditions during construction. Out of that $388,000, currently they're going to have $338,000 left over of unspent monies that they can use it on operations, staffing, other things with the project. Okay, so I just want to point that out that we're very proud of those numbers, and I think that the county, I know that when we met with the commissioners, they gave a big thumbs up. They were very surprised that they had all this money left over. They just didn't realize that they had the money in the savings accounts to make it work. But also, if you drive by, I think you're going to appreciate what we did design-wise. Worked with a lot of the historic folks in downtown Rushville to make sure that we got a building that fit into the across the street from their historic courthouse.
How did you determine,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
beds? How number of beds?
119 beds.
Yeah, I mean,
How did we determine that?
yes, and not.
We will talk about that.
Because Michelle does that.
Yeah.
Does she want to be in the jail? I mean, you talked to all these people.
Sure.
You came up with what you wanted.
We will talk about how we project our beds here in just a couple minutes, all right? And if I don't answer all your questions at that point, we'll come back and I'll address it a little bit more, okay? So, a little bit about jails. And I think it's just good to understand the whole process. And what we would do is if we have the fortunate opportunity to work with you, we'll get together all the folks that make up this overall, what I will call the Fayette County justice system, from the judges, prosecutor, probation, community corrections, sheriff, commissioner, representative, council, whatever. We'll get in a great big room and we'll talk about the whole process of a feasibility study, what the goals are, what you want to accomplish out of it, as well as what the deliverable is going to be at the end of the day, so you can go to the county and talk to all your citizens of your county. A little bit about jails. Your jail, at one time, was a jail that worked very well. Okay? It worked. You probably had people from various different locations that wanted to come and look at your jail and say, hey, how's that jail in Connersville? What did they do? How's it working? As other people were starting to design jails. But quite honestly, that's door number one. So often of the facilities is you've got door number one. The jails were designed for the bad guys. And I don't mean to say that in a derogative manner, but it was designed for the bad guys. Unfortunately, jails today, probably 70-75% of your jail is a lot more than just the bad guys. It is being used for a lot more things, whether it's the addictions, the mental health, behavioral management issues, and we're putting all the same people into that same facility. And it's tough. It's tough for the folks that work there. It's tough for the inmates because they don't work well in that. They're not going, and there's not room for the rehabilitation of the classrooms so that you can reduce the recidivism. And so too often what happens is everybody's blaming, why isn't the jail working, okay? But the reality of it is that the jail was not designed for the inmates that you have in there today. And so as we look at long-term what a jail can be or should be, is that we're trying to look at things to be able to address all three of these doors here. What I will say, and I will say it every time I meet, the worst thing that you can do is to ignore door number 2 and 3 and go build a big warehouse and warehouse inmates. It's your most expensive option, but so often, it happens way too often, and that you really need to address door number 2 and 3 as you start to look at your overall jail. One thing I want to point out here is, let's go back to the 1980s, okay? 1980s, we had President Reagan and Nancy Reagan. What was one of their big things? Was the war on drugs. And if you start looking at that, you look at the 1990s with all the mental health institutions, it's changed. And you look at the population of our prisons and our jails from the 1980s to just 3 or 4 years ago, it's more than tripled. It is more than tripled. Is that, and it's just pure stats, is our jails have become a lot more than just for those bad guys. And this is just some of the reasons why it's doing that. But it's just something that as you can continually talk to your constituents in your county, is to understand why our jail is overcrowded.
So in addition to the reasons why our county jails are overcrowded today, now don't shoot the messenger, but House Enrolled Act 1006, some people refer to that as House Bill 1006. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that, but that has also contributed to the perfect storm. So the state of Indiana Department of Corrections, they said we're tired of building beds, to deal with the medical, mental health, behavioral management, addictions issues. So since they get to make the rules, they also get to change the rules. So they took the felonies through A through D and they recategorized them 1 through 6. And now, in House Enrolled Act 1006 or House Bill 1006, they said, okay, from now on, to help reduce the state population, that if you're convicted of a level 6 felony and you're sentenced to less than 1 year, you serve it at the local county level. No longer can you ship them to the state DOC facility. So that has caused a big influx of population in our county jail. Now this image up here, you can see in the upper right-hand corner, it's handwritten up there, but that's from 1987, from San Antonio publication. But you can see there, state DOC, basically saying, hey, this ought to fix our overpopulation or our overcrowding problem. You can see the county jail, the lower right-hand side, that's just busting at the seams. So then, our legislators said, okay, we hear you. There's enough people out here, as far as the county commissioners, county council, sheriffs, complaining about basically this as an unfunded mandate. You know, you're forcing all of this on us, and there's no way for us to fund this. So then they said, okay, well, maybe we ought to enact Senate Bill 122. And basically what that is, they said, okay, so now what's required, any community that's considering building a new jail, you have to go around and you have to ask your surrounding counties if they're interested in going in together to build a regional jail. So you kind of share and split some of the cost. So there's a local agreement, an interlocal agreement that has to be signed and agreed upon between the governing body, the fiscal body, and the sheriff. And to date, I think we've been involved in three different projects, and we work with clients and we give them the letter, and as an example, they send out to the surrounding counties. And so far, every single one of them have come back negative. So, not interested.
Let me add one thing to that. And in Indiana, it's just a different way of looking at it. And you probably have read, you've heard that Henry County, Madison County is working Kim Cronk, commissioners, working very, very hard for Henry County to try and do something. They also worked with Rush County to try and do some things. Let's take a different road. You go to Kentucky. They have 120 counties. Less than half of the counties have a jail because they do regional jails. But it's what they've always done. So it's just a little different mindset, it's a little different approach. I'm not saying one's better than the other by any means at all. It's just in Indiana, we have 91 counties have a jail, Ohio County doesn't, and we're just all used to having that county jail in our county. But it's just a different approach. Maybe someday it'll work, but there's just a lot of steps you got to go through thinking about how would it work. So, just to show that.
And then they came back and they said, okay, well, let's introduce House Bill 1078. So House Bill 1078 basically says, okay, counties, we're going to give you a little bit of reprieve. So now you can see there with those 4 different criteria that if a particular individual is charged or qualifies for any one of those 4, they will now accept them. But in working with several counties across the state and across the Midwest, but here in the state of Indiana in particular, they're seeing very little relief from House Bill 1078.
Why we bring this up is as we go through to do a feasibility study and we work with your training projections, we like to identify this just so that you can share that with the folks in the county.
Now, the other thing that's very important to understand when you're doing a study is the county jail standards that we have to comply with. As I believe we've demonstrated, we do this every day. This is all we do, is correctional justice related work. We have a very good working relationship with the state jail inspectors. They're just a few blocks from our office very frequently. We roll up our set of drawings and we call them and we say, hey, you have 10 minutes to spend with us. We go down, we unroll drawings and ask them questions and they give us feedback. Recently did that at Huntington County and proved to be very beneficial. But we work with all of these standards, codes, every day. And we have a very good working relationship with the DOC.
The sooner you get them involved, the better it is. So just a few things that as we look at, and then we're really going to dive into what this is all about. But I think that as you go through, if you say, you know what, we need to add 30 beds, we need to add whatever the number of beds to your facility, there's just some different things that we need to think about. And we've touched on them here a little bit. But just some of the different things as far as whenever you talk about the mental health, behavioral management, some of the addiction issues. Also, if you go back to the 1980s, look at your jail then to look at now, there's a whole lot more females today than there were back 30 years ago. And these are just things that make a difference. And again, what we're trying to do is that 6-sided concrete box, throw away the key approach, just doesn't work long term. And we're trying to identify to help you so that we're just not overbuilding, but we're building the right beds in the right ways to do some things. What I will always say, and I will say this loud and clear, as I know that I live in Martinsville, Morgan County. Rod Bray was one of the junior authors whenever House Bill 1006 went into play. We did an addition on the Morgan County Jail in 2011. Skyrocketed. Percentage-wise, the number of inmates per 1,000 were one of the highest in Indiana. So what happened was about 3 years ago, Norman Voiles, commissioner, called and said, Eric, we got to do something about this. So we went and talked with them. My first thing was, you know what, guys? We're not adding on to this jail. We're not doing it, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to figure out why we have so many people in jail. And that's where we get all again, the probation, the prosecutor, the community corrections, the judges, the sheriff, all of them put together. And what we look at is alternative ways to keep people out of jail. And it's something here in Fayette County you need to look at. You've got your work release, you've got community corrections, you've got all the different tools. Are there different things that you can look at through your diversion programs? Are there ways that you can get additional funding for staffing, for the operations of that? Those are things that we like to look at to help you out. We're not here to build or to do a big addition, we're here to do the right addition, whatever it may be with that. But also your crisis intervention team, whether you use the CIT or not, but at that point of arrest, point of bringing folks into the jail, are you putting people in jail that really should be going somewhere else? And just looking at those and assessing those as you go through the overall steps. Also, what we will say is that so often where a lot of jails fail is once you release those inmates back to the public. And it's that transition to go back onto the street, to go back to do the different things. And that is a tough point. And we like to walk through steps to help you identify what those items are to make sure that we're doing it in the right way. We'll always say, you know, one of the best things you can do is to keep your average length of stay down as low as you possibly can for those inmates, to get them through the system, to get them through their court dates, and to figure out where they're going. Don't care if you do an addition, don't do an addition. Always take these things in mind as you process your overall inmates. It does make a difference. So, Kathy, the question you asked about how do we project what these bed needs are? There's really 5 different things that we start to look at whenever we're looking at our trending projections. One is we do look at your county population. Is what's your population today versus 2000, 1980, 1960. Look at the growth or decline of your population. Look at the type of people that are living here. Look at the age of the people. You know, you're probably similar to a lot of other counties, as your county's probably getting older, your average age in your county. It probably is. But we look at those trending projections because for the county population, because it makes a difference of the type of inmates that you may have in your jail. Also, the demographics of the people that are moving into Fayette County are the ones that are living here and working. We'll always look at the admissions to the jail. And the admissions to the jail can be really skewed in a lot of different ways. And we want to make sure that as we're looking at the number of admissions to the jail, what are the charges? How many charges do they have? How are they going into the jail? What's the frequency, the male, the female, the different types of crimes, and looking at those numbers and look at them closely. And there can be different factors on why more people are going to jail at one time versus something else. Scott alluded to maybe there could be some legislative, some judicial things, some law enforcement issues. Quite honestly, when we did a study a little bit that away, a little bit south of here, one of the things we saw a big jump in admissions to the jail. The sheriff's like, what happened? And he smiled and he goes, quite honestly, we got a lot of young law enforcement. They were making a lot of arrests. And it put a spike on the system, and then it balanced itself off. So we try to look for some abnormalities because we don't want to skew long-term projections based on just 1 or 2 years, either up or down. So we will take back as much information as we possibly can get about your average length of stay. How long, when somebody goes to jail, how long are they in that jail before they're released or moved on to somewhere else? The average daily population. We'll look at it over a long period of time. As much information as we can get from your jail management software as absolutely possible, we'll analyze each one of those points. We've got very elaborate spreadsheets that we plug all the numbers in, and it starts to calculate these things. And then also then your incarceration rate of not just the people that are going to jail, but they stay at jail and just not released, you know, the 24 hours and then get out of jail for whatever. But what we're trying to do there is we're trying to see what is the influencing your jail population. There's a lot of different factors that come into play on that. And then what we do is that we start to project out, and we project out typically 20 years, plus or minus, but 20 years we're projecting out of what your rated bed capacity should be at, we'll say, year 2040, okay? keeping in mind that if you look at any kind of addition, no matter what the number is, today, if you do the full thing, you may not need all of those beds for, it's kind of hard to see there, but you may not need an extra 50 beds today. But in 20 years, you may need those extra beds. So then we start talking about what are those beds used for? Do you build them all? Do you build part of them? Whatever the case may be with that. Then one thing that we always will talk about is that we're wanting to make sure that we are also building the right types of beds. And I know you've heard me talk about that, but is it more dorm style? Is it single bed cells? Is it 2-bed cells? Is it medical beds? We help you walk through those things, and we explain all those different things so that you understand what they are, so that you make the best decisions as you talk to the folks in the county. And there's a lot, what I would really focus on is that this is the driver for what your overall project is. So this is something that I would recommend that you have a small group to really dive in, to really understand all the different data points that we use, but also then to present it publicly in a larger group so that everybody understands why when we say that as a collective group, that we need to add X amount of beds, that everybody understands why we're doing that. It makes it much more successful overall.
So one of the other primary components of the study is looking at the physical structures, the buildings, the facilities. So what we propose as part of our study assessment is to look at the existing jail, the old jail, as well as the Dollar General store. We would propose to look at all 3 of those buildings as part of this study.
And I know we gave you a proposal, it seems like a long time ago, but back in I think December of 17, we would keep our fee the same to add the 3rd building, because I know our study that we've looked at, but I've come over and I've looked at some other things, and they're like, hey, can we look at this other old jail? And we do that, we just add that while we're here as well.
So we've done a lot of these needs assessments, and we've fine-tuned them to the point that we know exactly what it is we're going to be looking for. So you can see up there, just as an example, we break it down by discipline. What I mean by discipline is you can see architectural, and you can see the bullet pointed items. Those are typically the types of things that we're looking for, as well as the site, the mechanical, which also includes plumbing, fire protection, and then electrical and security, which also includes IT and technology, as well as your fire alarm system. So we look at all of those items. We will be here on site with architects, engineers, and we walk through the facilities every square inch. We get up on the roofs if they're accessible. We look at the condition of all of these components. And what we're assessing is the life expectancy. Whether or not, if it's a new roof, or whether or not you've got maybe 4 to 5 years left on your roof, for example, or a chiller or a boiler or things like that. And what that leads to then is we translate that into a graph over on the right. Now, think of it like a stoplight, whereas green is good, yellow is caution, and red is we need to be applying the brakes. So in the left-hand column right here, and I just chose architecture as an example, those building system components that was on the previous slide, those are identified over here. This is the year that it was originally put in service, so if the building was constructed originally in 1980, this starts 1980, 1981, 82, 83, and so on and so forth. Over here, we have the anticipated life expectancy for each one of these building system components. So footings, foundations, for example, it may be 100 years. We put 100 years over here, and then you subtract the years of service, and over here in the far right-hand column, the delta then is the remaining years as far as life expectancy for that building, or for that building system component. And we chart all this out. So when you start looking into the yellows, that means it's 5 years just prior to reaching its expected life expectancy. Then the red is you're at it. So for example, let's just say a single ply EPDM or TPO roof has 20-year life expectancy. So on year 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, we're going to color code those yellow. Just to kind of draw attention to the fact that, as commissioners and council begin thinking about maintaining and operating these facilities, you really ought to think about starting to budget some monies just to set aside for dealing with these components. And then red, then obviously we've hit year 21. So we're starting to be on borrowed time regarding a TPO as an example. Then the 5-year right here, just a sliding bar. So Wayne County, Richmond, Commissioner Kenny Powell asked for us to actually do the same process for every county-owned facility. And there was a bunch, especially when we got out to the fairgrounds. And we went through and did the same exact process and updated the charts like this. Well, it's to the point now that Kenny, if he does a boiler replacement or something like that, he'll call and he'll say, hey, Scotty, I need for you to update this spreadsheet and send it back to me. So what we do then on this chart, you will see some X's, some darker green and some X's. So for example, we did a chiller replacement. So we start the timeline over again and we designate that right here.
And
And we'll
becomes
usually
green.
put some notes over in the column so you understand, hey, there's a chiller replacement in 2008, for example.
The one thing we also like to look at this is that it's like your house, it's like anything else, is that you've got a whole lot of green. It also shows that you do maintain your facilities, all right? But at just some point in time, there are things that need to get replaced. So it's a good visual tool instead of just big, thick books of information. It's a visual tool that you can look at pretty quick, look at those 2 blue lines and say, what do we need to do the next 5 years? And you've got a good plan for that. Yeah.
I can't read the print on the y-axis and the x,
Yes.
the little tiny.
Okay. Can you explain that?
I just don't wonder what the little print read.
Can you scroll back one?
This is not your facility, it's just an example.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, if you look at the architectural, these are generally the types of items that we're looking for when we do an assessment. So if you look at those bullet pointed items, now scroll forward once. And this is, I just chose architectural, again, as a discipline. So many of those same bullet pointed items are listed right over here, the things that we're looking at and analyzing. So this is the year that the building was constructed, then let's say 1980. So we can start go 1981, 82, 83, and so forth.
Okay.
And that's how we chart it out.
Okay.
Just a way to quantify it.
Oh, I know. I
Yeah.
just couldn't. I didn't know
Yeah.
what the.
But no, it's not specifically your facility. That's where we would come with the whole host of folks and we'd walk through your building with your maintenance staff, jail commander, so we get a good feel of what the building is.
The other thing I would say is, and Eric talked about it, that don't be super alarmed when you start seeing a lot of red on the right-hand side. That's what happens. We will oftentimes, say that jails are some of the most abused types of buildings that you can build because they're operated, maintained 24/7 by people that don't want to be there. And oftentimes, many of them, their sole entertainment is just trying to destruct. So don't be alarmed because that's just the natural progression of a facility.
So like in Rushville.
But in your defense, though, any structure is going to have a lot of red.
Yes,
At some point in
at some
time.
point in time, yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
we,
Yes.
I mean, anybody that knows anything about building structures know
Yeah.
that there's only a life.
The roof's only gonna last so long.
Yeah, it's
So-
only going to live so long.
Yeah, and if I did that same thing for my own house, I'm to the point now that I'm ready for a roof. And so I would be starting red right there. And I've also got 2 kids getting ready to go to college. So in my head, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, how am I going to
Roof,
budget?
college.
Where am I going to?
Sell, buy smaller.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Sell
Yeah.
body parts.
Yeah, so how many kids?
You said Rush County? Sorry.
Well, Rush County, like you tore their building down, they're gonna put up a parking lot. So that building not be built for anything?
It is the oldest jail in Indiana that's not been added on to. Okay, Rush County, yes. Don't necessarily have the slide here, but Rush County has a lot of just general, there are a lot of red. Okay, just to be honest. Okay, an awful lot of red. But the other thing about Rush County is some other things. They no longer meet the Indiana jail standards. Okay, now they're grandfathered in, so they don't have to, but they still get written up a lot for things in the building that just don't meet the standards. The building's not ADA compliant at all. Okay, you've got, most of the cell doors are 24 inches wide, okay? We need 32 to 36, just depending on what it is. There's a lot of things that just doesn't work. You also look at the other thing, and we do have a slide on it here in a minute, is staff efficiency. Okay, the way the building was designed was an old linear style design. We do something else, it's very modular. Think of a person in the middle and you've got a pie and you got inmates all the way around you. It's not like that. So if we started looking at the cost to renovate, update, that was one thing, but then we also looked at long-term cost. The staff is the most expensive thing that you will have in your building. It's not building the building, it's the staff. We'll talk about it here in just a couple slides on that. And ultimately, once you add all these things up, it was better for them to build a new, more efficient, from a maintenance point of view, as well as from a staffing point of view, than to try to renovate, expand, and do all the things with their building that they needed to do. And it just, they got to the point that it just kept adding up, kept adding up, kept adding up. They knew it, but they also knew that they had a lot of problems with their building. We talked about, could we turn it into a work release? Could we do all these other things? And it kept coming back to, we could, but we still have to update it for these other people to move into it. Just because it's not a jail, it still needs to be updated if it's used by the work release and some other things. So it just became a very, it was more cost effective to build the new jail. It's always tough questions because people will say, okay, we're going to build the new jail. The next question is where? Then after that is, what do we do with the old building? And that's always a question that we always talk about very diligently in conversations.
So architects, go ahead.
What did Rush County determine, how did Rush County decide to fund it?
Income tax. Quite honestly, that's pretty much how everyone does it. The property tax, if it's basically the $12 million mark, it's going to go on the ballot. It's a tough sell. Okay, if you do the property taxes, the backup, pay for it. And what happens is that the income tax, you go through all the studies, you look at the things, and you work with your state legislator, get it passed. At that level, then the council comes and they appropriate, you do all your voting, you do that. But that's how basically most old jails are funded in Indiana. There's a couple of different options. I know that, there's some, as these guys might like to talk about, some other alternative ideas and things, but the vast majority of all jails in Indiana are income tax. Now, you can do the USDA loans, you can do some other things to try to extend the life of the loans. There's some other financial ways, but the true essence of how you generate the funds to pay the revenue to pay for it is the income tax.
And all these discussions and decisions, that's part of your feasibility
Oh,
study?
yeah, absolutely.
Was that an extra charge along the way?
No, we'd recommend that you bring in part of a financial advisor that can talk about some of those things, but we can absolutely give you ideas and things about it. But they're the number crunchers, they do that, but we would help to get you engaged with somebody on
Or
that.
part of like you're talking about, where you could tear it down or fix it?
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely what we
There's
do.
no extra charge
Oh, no,
as you go
no,
along?
not at all,
or-
not at all, not at all.
So we've identified the buildings, architects and engineers, we've gone through them, we've taken notes, we've taken photographs, we've filled out the charts regarding life expectancy. One of the next things we do is we go through and we categorize. So you can see here, priority 1, currently critical, priority 2, potentially, priority 3, necessary, not yet critical, priority 4, recommended. We go through and we prioritize these things because we like to look at them individually, because it can be overwhelming. With 3 buildings in particular, and you're looking at all the disciplines, different components, building system components. Now, when we did this at Wayne County, we sat down, we did this internally, and then we had a sit-down meeting with the Sheriff and Jail Administration when we did their jail, as well as the commissioners. And we came up with a list because the county commissioners wanted a capital improvement project dealing just with the jail to address a lot of their needs. And that's currently out to bid. Bids are due tomorrow. but it has to do with a variety of things there at their jail, just improvements that they needed to incorporate and do to get their facility brought up to standards.
So let me add one thing about this, is we're also very smart about this, okay? We're not gonna replace ceilings if you got a leaky roof, okay? We need to take care of the things that are in essence in order how to do it. And as Scott pointed out, that currently critical, that's not painting walls, that's not replacing carpet. That's replacing, if you've got leaks, if you've got a boiler that's not working, if you've got exhaust fans, if you've got things that are just code compliant issues or daily maintenance items, those are the things that we're looking at. And then we try to spread these out as long as we can. Typically, the priority 4 may be 5 to 10 years down the road before you ever get even to consider those types of things. So it's just not all at once. It's trying to give you that, balance your checkbook is you're buying all those Christmas presents and you buy them over a duration of time, not all at once.
Because
Yeah,
I heard
absolutely.
some time ago, it's just like they were flushing, the prisoners were flushing sheets down the toilet, causing overflow, causing this. So do you look at what's the best and greatest and potential problems, and this is your plumbing fixture that we recommend for you?
Want to look at the
Alleviate
fixtures?
that.
Yeah, so it's what we refer to as combi units. So in an inmate
Combination.
holding cell, a combi unit is a combination, toilet bowl, and then right above that is their hand washing sink. And the way we used to build jails before we were in the profession, where the sanitary pipe comes out the back, in other words, when they try to flush a sheet and it goes down and it gets clogged in that pipe, there was nothing there to catch it. So the way we design them today is we have what we refer to as a clean out pin. So on the back side of that combi unit, where they try to flush, there's a pin right there that catches it. So it can't get down underneath concrete 40 yards down, within the jail and get stopped, and then you gotta call Roto-Rooter and that type of thing. So it gets caught right there at the back of the toilet, the combi unit. Now, the other thing that we're starting to incorporate a lot is what we refer to as a water management system. You heard Eric mention Willoughby. Willoughby is a major, if not the biggest manufacturer of correctional toilet type fixtures in the country. And they have a water management system that, a correctional officer can sit there and control. And he can sit there and he can say, okay, Johnny down there in that far cell, he only gets 2 flushes per hour. If he tries to flush more than 2 times an hour, it just won't work. So it's practically impossible for them to flood their cell, for example. And then, he can lift that and he can say, okay, Johnny, you've been good for 2 days. I'm gonna give you, 4 flushes per hour, or whatever the criteria may be. So there are ways that we're addressing that today much more efficiently and effectively. than we used
But
to.
the other aspect of it is you probably have a large water and sewer bill, is that they can monitor that and they can reduce that so that you actually can save on utilities, the operations of your building.
The other thing, if you were in your jail administrators, I don't know if there's any here, but if there were, and if they get ready to go into a shakedown, they think there's contraband in a holding cell or a day room area, well, they know inmates are smart. When they see correctional officers, coming up to the day room front, and they got their shield and, they're getting ready to go into a shakedown, inmates, what do? They hurry up and run in there and they flush it, get rid of the evidence. Well, now, with the Willoughby water management system, they can just sit there and they can just kill it. So inmate goes over and pushes the button, try to flush it, it's not gonna work. So that's another benefit
A
of,
big difference when you could turn it off manually, you would always have one more flush.
yeah.
But with the water management system, when they hit stop, there is no more, one more flush.
Doesn't
So
work.
they'll find the stuff and obviously you resolve issues.
So you heard Eric mention before, we work in a lot of communities, and you guys are asking very good questions, a lot of the same questions that a lot of communities ask. And Eric is absolutely right. Oftentimes, it's not the construction cost, the bricks and the mortar cost, that will determine whether or not a project is feasible. In other words, whether or not a community can afford it. So often than not, it's the operations and staffing cost. I say that because I encourage people just like you across the Midwest. It's essential that you hire and work with an architect that does this a lot and understands the importance of staffing costs. For example, this is just a hypothetical jail. It's actually one we've constructed in southern Indiana. This is just part of it. There's more administration and offices up at the top. But this is the intake booking area, Vehicle Sally Port. This is the intake booking counter. This is a 24/7 post. So there's somebody here at this post every single hour, every single day, every single year. You have holding cells around the perimeter. This is the other key point. This is master control. So this is the general inmate housing area. So this is where the majority of your inmates are. This is also a 24/7 post. And typically you'll have what's called a rover, especially at night where they can go through and assist if somebody needs help. But you can see that the direct line of sight from the intake booking counter to the master control, back out to the Vehicle Sally Port when their officer, road deputy comes in, they extract the inmate out of the back of the car. This is where they're going to be most combative, most generally. It's not until they actually get in here and they realize, okay, I'm caught. I'm in jail now. But usually right here is where they're going to be most combative. But that's why it's so important to get the line of sight to help reduce your staffing costs. Eric, can we get the staffing cost
So
scenario?
if you look at one of the folks in your jail, and I don't know what the numbers are, but we're going to say that a person working in your jail, if you take his salary and you take all of his benefits and you add it all up, okay? And it's always a lot more than what people initially realize. But we're going to say that that's $50,000. We can say $40,000. We'll say $40,000. If it's $40,000, each one of these posts, if you man this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that takes 5.2 employees. Okay? You look at vacations, you look at 8-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts. This will typically take 5 people to man that post 24/7. That's 5 people. All right? Now, if you look at this post for 5 people, they make $40,000 a year. That's everything, all in. Okay? And we say there is no increase in pay, no increase in health costs. Okay? We know that's not true, but we'll say it is. If you do the math, that 5 at $40,000 over 20 years, that's $4 million. If it's $50,000 a year per person, it's $5 million. If it's $60,000, it's $6 million. Okay? So why we bring this up and why we believe it is so important, even in your very early phases of doing a study, is if you work with someone that doesn't think about this, you make this where instead of here with these straight sight lines, they move it over here, and you have to add another person. That could be a $5 million decision they made just because of staffing.
They didn't know what they didn't know.
And that's something that as you go through it, as a council, one of the things you always have to think about is just not how much did the building cost, or how much did that addition cost, is how much is our operation and staffing cost is. And that's all some of the things that you need to know. Just, okay, it's going to cost us $3 million to do this project, but we need to add 4 staff. What's that cost? You need to know it because the last thing to have happen is for the sheriff to stand here when he moves in and goes, I need to hire some people. And you go, what? You just got your building. Why do you have to hire people? So it's always something we need to think about. That's why we say no surprises, because too often people will open jails, they don't know it, they haven't worked with someone that tells them that, and then they can't use all of their beds because they don't have enough staffing to operate them. And it happens, unfortunately.
So, real quick story, Stark County, Indiana, we designed a new jail. And at the beginning of the project, we're going through the study, and I'm telling them, based on this plan that we had worked on together collectively and kind of settled on, I said, you're going to need to hire 3 more people. But you've doubled your size, for example. We go through, we construct the building, we get ready to move in, Commissioner Kathy Norm calls me. I've been told I got to hire 4 people. You told me 3. I don't know. Let me come up and meet with you. The difference was the former sheriff, Sheriff Oscar Cowan, he's been 911 dispatch. He, for his master control, he wasn't going to man that 24/7 at night when the inmates are locked down. He was going to switch that over to the 911 dispatchers. The new sheriff came in and said, "That's the stupidest thing ever. I'm not doing that." So that ended up being the difference. And once I explained that to Kathy Norm, she said, "You're right. remember that. But anyway, that's just how important staffing can be.
So that's kind of like, and I don't know, I'm not a commissioner.
Sure.
So like now, maybe our jail's not compliant because we don't have enough people. So that's because of the setup of the jail.
It could be a lot of different reasons.
You have a lot more people incarcerated than you used to. So
Demographics.
the ratios.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to afford the staff.
Yeah, and that's a big deal, is there's probably just, you probably count on the number of jails in Indiana that are staffed appropriately. And it's just, you make compromises, just like we do in everyday life.
And remind me again, how much is your cost of your feasibility study?
$6,000. Yeah. And I have copies of our December 21st, I
Yeah.
think it's December
The
21st of 17, and it's the same thing.
jail population is over doubled from when we moved into that facility.
Oh, I believe it.
Because I was at the old jail in '86, moving to the new jail in '89.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I believe it. So one question, one statement, because we walk into this as absolutely no preconceived ideas. And also, I am not here to ever tell you that you need to go build a huge facility. I'm here to tell you what you really, I believe what you really should do. But one question that's always asked was, we're not gonna do anything. We're just gonna send all of our extra inmates out of the county. Okay, we're not gonna deal with it. We're just going to keep our jail and our rated bed capacity. We're gonna set that number, anything that goes over it, we're going to just send them out of county. So one of the things that you always have to look at is typically, and the number's going to change, it's going to go up, but it's $35 per day. So if you have 50 inmates at $35 a day, and you're sending 50 out, it's roughly $638,750, plus the cost to transport them back and forth to go to court, plus all your medical costs, plus those other things. So keep in mind that that's just not a $638,000 issue. There's other costs that go into it. The bigger thing is also is that finding the beds, it can be difficult. Some counties, like Rush County, is going to have a few beds when they're first open, but at some point in time, they're going to need all those beds for their inmates. Okay, Decatur County, they're obviously doing a new jail. Maybe they got a few beds when they open, but you know what? There's other counties that are already calling them saying, hey, we need some help here with this. So that's one thing that we always just want to show, because somebody in the public may say, hey, you know what? Let's not do anything. Let's just send them elsewhere.
What's the cost to do that? What do you have to pay that out of jail?
It's $35 a day to put them in their jail, if they want them, okay?
Okay.
And you know, when you send someone out to another county, they don't want your bad people. They don't want the troublemakers. They want your good inmates, because they don't want them to be an issue in their jail.
So that's the
It's
same.
easy money.
Yeah, that's like, so
Yeah.
it would cost that,
Yeah.
our county to keep.
At least that. Some counties are paying up to $45. I think you just moved the mouse. Okay. So on this one, I think this is an important slide because, you know, obviously you're talking with other counties and you're hearing all different types of things. And I just want to be very clear to help you so that you're getting the right information. Is when we talk about costs for a project and you go say, hey, Commissioner so-and-so, how much did your jail cost? Okay? There's three different numbers that you really should just know. There's one that's called the hard construction cost, and that's how much you actually paid that contractor to go build that building. Okay? You know, you want to do that garage addition on your house, you paid that contractor that amount. Well, that's that. That's the brick and mortar to build the building. Then there's the soft cost. Building that garage, that's your closing cost. That's all your loan stuff. That's your building permits. That's, you know, somebody designed it. Somebody oversaw it in construction. You got to do some geotech reports. All these different types of things at the bottom. Okay? And then you get to the total project cost, which is the hard construction cost and the soft cost totaled together. As a council, you need to budget and finance the total project cost. Or where I want to be very clear so that there's no mix-ups is that you budget $20 million for a project, and on bid day, you get those hard construction costs at $17 million. Doesn't mean you're $3 million under budget. Okay? You still have all these types of things that you have to pay for to get up to that full amount. So when you go talk to another county and you say, hey, how much did your jail cost? The commissioner, and I'm just using this, may say, it's $15 million to build the jail. The council goes, it was $18 million to fund it. So if you ask one person, they may say 15, you ask the next person, they may say 18. So just be careful as you start to compare and to look at some things on projects, just so that you really understand that you're comparing the right things to for the right issues. Just kind of just an experience that we've learned. So with this, just 2 slides left and we'll be done here. The feasibility study and the life cycle cost analysis. To me, it is the most important phase of an entire project, because that is where you're determining what the scope of work is going to be, how much it's going to cost, and how long is it going to take. When should we do it and how long it's going to take. Whether it takes you 90 days to do our report, then it takes you 5 years to make up your mind that, yeah, we really are going to do that. Make sure that you cross all your T's in that feasibility study. It is absolutely paramount that your community understands it, that you all understand it. You've got the support of the whole justice system here in Fayette County. As you're going through all that, is determining those financial capabilities and opportunities, whether you got cash on hand to just pay for something, whether you do a income tax, you do the property tax, you do some combination of those. You look at different opportunities, so what is best for Fayette County. Okay? Once you go through, and again, these 2 top things up here are, to me, by far the most important thing that you do in the overall process. Critical that you take your time, you don't rush it, and you do it right. Then you come into a design phase. Depends on what you did. If you do a small little renovation, they only take 3 or 4 months. If you do some big jail, it may take you 6 months to design it. Whatever the case is. You go through a bidding process, award contracts. Typically it takes 2 months to go out and get your bids, to review them, to award the stuff. And then the construction, it just depends on what it is. Okay? The other thing up here, especially here, is where your jail staff, your sheriff's office, you start developing your policies and procedures for when you expand, when you change something in your building, you move to another building, you absolutely got to start thinking about those policies and procedures. Talk about those operational and staffing costs. It starts day one. It's just not, hey, how many beds do we need to build? How much is it going to cost? The feasibility study should encompass all of that. And if it's not, then you're going to find some surprises down the road that makes it difficult for the project to be a success. So in closing on this, probably 2 of the things that Scott and I have talked the most about as anything in the last 25 years is you got to generate awareness. Okay? There's still someone in your county that goes, that's the new jail. Okay? It happens. It's still the new jail. You got to generate an awareness is that our jail's something different today. We've got to make improvements to be able to house the inmates that we have, to have the staff retention that we have in the facility. There are things that we have to do to it. Whatever those things are. Once you start to generate the awareness, social media, newspaper, coffee shop, meetings, go different parts of the county, talk to folks. Absolutely the best, without question, the best process I've ever seen of county commissioners and council working with constituents in the county is Perry County, Indiana. Little Perry County, Tell City, Indiana. On the Ohio River, halfway between Louisville and Evansville. Bill Amos, commissioner, still commissioner today, absolutely said we're going to go to any little nick and cranny in our county. We're going to go to all 3 of the very, very small high schools in the county. We're going to the fairgrounds. We're going to the courthouse. We're going to all these places. We're going to tell people, Eric, you got 15 minutes. Tell them what the scope of work is. Then we had a financial advisor that said, you got 15 minutes to tell them how they're going to pay for the jail. And then we're going to open it up for questions. So we took 30 minutes. 3 hours later, after the questions were done, people understood what they were doing. Then that's when they built the consensus to move forward with the project. And when they moved forward with their project, they had a jail that was built in 1964. That was a house that they added the jail onto. Okay? Added the jail onto the house. That was just a residence, and they added on. The The visitation booth, they had one between the inmate and the citizen, was plexiglass, not detention glazing. It was plexiglass. Okay, that was it. You push on it and just went back and forth. They had a horrendous jail. They built a new jail, but Bill Amos said, "You've got to help us to go through this process," and we did. And it all started with the feasibility study. And you've got to help us sell this because we need help in learning how to do this. So we spent an enormous amount of time with generating that awareness. And as soon as we figured out, or as soon as the people figured out what they needed to do, it was easy to get the consensus and to move forward. So personally, that's where we believe that the community support, engage them, let them know, let them voice their opinions on why they don't want a new jail or why they don't want to add on, why they don't want to spend money on the jail, but help them understand why there are necessary things. Because anytime you talk about a jail project, I mean, people are happy to see you. So it's one of those things that you have to, you have, as commissioners, you have a requirement to provide the space, safe and secure environment for the inmates, for the staff that are working there, and it's the sheriff's duty to make sure that it is a safe and secure environment with that. So that's a whole lot of information. And to be quite honest, we probably scratched the surface. There were a lot more slides that we typically can have in this, but I think that in closing on this is that we look at this from a comprehensive approach. It's just not walk in, hey, you need to add 100 beds, this is how much it is, and we're done. There's a process that you go through to make sure that everyone understands, that all of you plus others understand, why was it that many beds? Why is it that much money? Is that we want to make sure that you understand, and there's just a process that we go through to make sure that that happens. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
all right.
Thank you.
Any other questions for these folks?
The only thing I'd say, Eric, and I guess whoever would do this feasibility study, I can see how the life cycle analysis is so important to this on doing the life cycle analysis of the buildings that are in existence, at what stage they are, and then different proposals that you may make on what you can do to really lay out a comparison between all the life cycle charts to determine what's going to be best. I think one of the problems the public really has with building a new jail, it looks a lot different on the inside than it does on the outside.
Sure.
And because you can go past our jail and it doesn't, it looks in fair condition.
Sure.
The brick looks okay,
They'll
doesn't it?
bring it close,
Until you get up real close, right?
and so there's a hard consensus, and maybe we'll have something else and parade citizens through to see the place. But,
We've seen counties do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rush County was the same way. I didn't think their jail, from the outside, it was a nice.
Nice
building.
limestone building.
Yeah.
But talking about Rush County,
Yeah.
you made the comment that their existing jail is the oldest in the state that hasn't been
Added
modified
on to.
or added to.
Yeah.
I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the jail that it replaced at the time that it was built was the oldest jail in the state of Indiana.
It may have been. It was there on the corner, I believe.
It was right next to it,
Right.
to the east
Yep.
of it. And I think at the time, the commissioners were in the situation where they currently had the oldest jail
Yeah.
in the state of Indiana. And that, because that was a big argument, well, it looks okay,
Sure.
it's just for inmates. Well, and
I think the oldest jail in Indiana is just to the east of you. It's Union County.
Yeah.
It was built in 1890. Funny thing about Union County, it was built in 1890, expanded in 1980, and reduced the bed population. That's
with
a
the
true story.
expansion.
Yeah. With the new addition, it reduced the rated bed capacity.
One point of clarification, we had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
That was not
We did a
ours.
study and started, but then they stopped the project. So,
You guys did a real good job in your presentation.
well, thank you, thank you. It's hopefully you see we're passionate about what we do, and we do enjoy doing what we're doing. So, we appreciate your consideration, and if there's any further questions, you let us know and contact us, and
Absolutely, yeah.
we'll address
So,
whatever.
if you think about it or go through things and you have questions, please reach out. and
So
ask
part of
for
your
help.
study is like talking to Michelle and talking to Joe and talking to the judges.
Absolutely.
Prosecutor,
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
all.
Yes.
And understanding that we don't have a budget.
Yeah.
yeah. And what we're trying to do is anyone that touches the jail, we're trying to understand how you impact each other. You know, there are tough decisions at times, I'm sure, between the sheriff and the prosecutor and the judges. There's tough decisions they have to make sometimes on if you need some available beds. And I'm sure there's all kinds of discussions. Almost every county has those. And it's just, they all work together. And you throw in the probation, community corrections, public defenders. They all have thoughts and opinions. And again, where we're trying to generate that awareness, build the consensus, we get them all together and we talk about it so that it's supported by all. So
So if it's determined not to build a new jail, your study will also show what it would cost to maybe renovate or update?
walking into this, we have no idea what the solution is. The best solution may be to renovate, add on to your jail, and that works perfectly fine. It may be to take one of those adjacent buildings we talked about, develop housing in those areas, put beds in those areas for a certain type of inmates. We don't know what that solution is. And we're very open-minded is that, again, we don't want to be the person that designs the big jail. We want to be the person that designs the right jail. Okay.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I
Thanks.
appreciate it. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.